Hey everybody, Rob Silverman here, Facebook Live. Got a really interesting, exciting title here. We're going to talk about plastics. So many people don't realize that plastics are in our everyday life. We are without question exposed to plastics. Got a whole bunch of emails yesterday to try and discuss the idea of plastics. There's been a 22% fold increase in plastic production between 1964 and 2014. In 2014 alone, there was 3.11 million tons of plastics used. It's projected to double by 2034. Actually, it's 311 million tons to be that we were exposed to using in 2014. Everybody's using plastics. Now, plastic wasn't used 100 years ago. There was no such thing. All of a sudden, we've had this advent. So as the high-level look, before we really dig into some of the details, is that the human race and humans were not supposed to have plastics and not supposed to be exposed to plastics. And clearly not only not supposed to be exposed to plastics, not only that, also not to be ingesting plastics. So a study here, the Annals of Internal Medicine, October 1st, 2019, the findings were various microplastics were detected in the human stool, actually suggesting inadvertent ingestion from different sources. Another study, Environmental Science and Technology, June 5th, 2019 actually, the findings, the average person may ingest between 74 and 121,000 microplastic particles annually. Now, plastic chemicals, some of the ones we like to talk about are BPA and phthalates, can harm human health. Love to go through some different studies on that. When you hear this, everybody's going to want to go BPA free without question. There was a direct association in study in JAMA in 2012 on the idea of urinary BPA concentration and obesity was prevalent in children and adolescents. So the higher the BPA amount in children, the higher obesity. So there's a direct correlation as this particular microplastic is obesogenic. In addition, 47% higher diabetes risk in those who have higher levels of urinary BPA. So it's not always the food. Food is a problem in America. That's why we have what we call the standard American diet. Sad. It's also our environment. It's these plastics that we're getting inhaled, that we're ingesting. BPA may cause testosterone reduction by adversely affecting the testes and the pituitary system, similar to estradiol. So men, it would be as if you took a birth control pill if you took in BPA. BPA is in plastics. BPA is in paper. It's in our currency. It's in our money currency. It's in our credit card paper. It's in the paper here that I wrote some notes on. It's in the magazines that people read. It's in our boarding pass if we don't have it on our phone. It's really almost in our life ubiquitous, if you will. So those cash register problems, cash register receipt problems, pose a problem because they are an extraordinary source of BPA. So say that I go with my wife and have a sushi meal now, and I sign the credit card. I sign the credit card, I touch not only the credit card, but I touch the credit card paper, and then I use my hands because sushi's finger food. So not only if I exposed it to my hands, I've also orally exposed it. So there's multiple ways to get it in, unfortunately. Now, if I decided to pay cash, the good old-fashioned American way, I've touched the paper, the money, the currency, put it down, and it's on my hands. So clearly, we need to clean our hands every time we touch any kind of paper, any kind of money, any kind of cash register receipt. When you come into my office, many people, especially now with the COVID-19, everybody's using credit cards. Now, many people aren't taking the receipts. We're good. Nobody wants to handle things from other people. But if you were, our cash register receipt paper is non-BPA. BPA is an ovarian toxin. So research actually was published in Environmental Health Perspectives, ovarian toxicity among most consistent and strongest effects found in both animal models and in women. So BPA, no bueno, not only for men, decreasing testosterone, also being an ovarian toxin. Think of all the women that are having problems with pregnancy. Not that it's always a woman problem, it's men and women, but those who are having a problem on their own system, some of the systems may be their inability to detox or inability to detox the overload of BPA exposure. BPA also has an adverse effect on what we call in vitro fertilization. Exposure to BPA may lead to reduced quantity and quality of embryos during reproduction. Many studies have shown that BPA could be the cause for the decrease in the frequency of implantation pregnancy and live birth rates in couples seeking in vitro fertilization. So in my building, we have a very famous fertility doc. Many women come in and ask, can we help them nutritionally? Some of the things that we recommend are a detox, clearly detoxing for these microplastics, these obesogenic, these toxins that raise people's blood sugar. Blood sugar is a major issue, again, with women trying to get pregnant. BPA, as we stated earlier, leads people down a path of increased blood sugar issues and a 47% increase in diabetes. BPA replacements actually cause productive problems. So even though it's BPA, many of the cups and other items still can cause reproductive problems because the arrays of alternative bisphenols used are very similar to BPA in their effect or their adverse effect on the body. So we use BPA, Canada uses BPS. There's really no health difference. They're both very detrimental. BPA alternatively disrupts the normal brain cell growth. It's actually tied to hyperactivity. So a study at the University of Calgary said that its research was the first to show that BPS, which I just mentioned earlier, was in ingredients in many products bearing BPA-free labels, actually caused abnormal growth surges of neurons in animal embryo. Another study, BPA exposure in U.S. approved levels alter insulin resistance. So elevating that insulin resistance to me may be the number one inflammatory problem. No one's ever going to be really heavy if they're too inflamed. Pregnancy is going to be real difficult if you're too inflamed. BPA actually alters insulin release in humans and in mice, and both in control and placebo groups. The actual even low exposure to BPA in the presence of glucose, if you had any sugar, triggers an insulin response. So how do we get rid of plastics from our bodies? That was a question. It's an excellent question. Well, one, obviously we want to decrease the exposure. So we want to use BPA free. We want to use glass instead of plastic. The old style glass is a big deal. We want to get away from paper cups, paper plates. Use the real deal. And maybe the biggest thing is to detox. A good quality detoxification program, for me, should last a minimum of 15 to 30 days. We offer them in our office. Those are great ways of detoxing these toxins and allowing the liver to function well. And how do we do that? Well, we change the people's diet. We give them a high diet in fruits and vegetables, low acidic foods, foods that are not man-made, more whole foods, and we use specific powders and pills to allow the liver to bifunctionally modulate and be balanced, to allow the breakdown of toxins and to go through the liver, be broken down into what we call a water-soluble toxin, and then excreted from the body via the kidneys and or the stool. BPA substitutes, once again, can trigger fat cell formations. So the chemicals in BPA-free products exhibit similar, what we call endocrine disrupting effects. So BPA, BPS, all of them, they actually mimic estradiol, and they cover the receptors. So when you consume or get exposed to BPA or BPS, they're blocking the estrogen receptors. So estrogen has no means to get absorbed and then sent to the liver. The number one, or one of the main purposes of liver detoxification, is to rid yourself of extra or excess estrogen. When you think of women and they have too much estrogen, what do you think of? Well, PMS. What else do you think of? Higher incidence of breast cancer. Men whose estrogen are too high with the negative feedback loop actually have what we call lower testosterone levels. So these mimickers, these endocrine mimickers, actually block the receptor sites. You have high circulating estrogen, leading you down this precipitous path towards failing health. So mom's exposure to BPA during pregnancy can actually put her baby on a course to obesity. They had associated measures of obesity in children at age 7. 94% of pregnant women had detectable levels of BPA. Let me say that again. 94% of pregnant women had detectable levels of BPA. BPA actually activates the immune response that persists for at least 3 generations. Let me expand upon that. It actually elevates and gives you what we call epigenetics, changes your genetic material which you're passing on up to 3 generations. We need to get rid of BPA. So when I decide to run for president in 2020, I will without question get rid of all plastics. And we're going back to steel. We're going back to glassware. We're going back to things that allow the body to be healthy. These toxins, and we live in a highly toxic world, need to be, one, decreased in our exposure and also increased in the ability to rid them from a body via detoxification pathways. Should you put hot lids on hot beverages? Not sure if this was discussed as I just jumped on. Dave D'Angelo. So great point. So a lot of people, when they get a cup of coffee, they're going to put that plastic covering on and they're sipping it. No, don't like it. Now, Dave, I know you're with Purity Coffee. You don't have the Keurig cups. Of course not. Why would you? Because that's plastic. So here we have these companies selling coffee, organic coffee, which is what we want. Because organic coffee has virtually no pesticides. Some companies actually have no mold and mycotoxins. However, it's encased in plastic, so when you break the plastic, you're getting all the particles and the microplastic particles while you drink the coffee. No way. So what you really want is you want to use a paperless filter or BPA filter, so you're able to use the grinds, or you grind down the beans and get the grinds and put it through the coffee processes. BPA, actually, interesting, there had been flawed analytical techniques that may have compromised risk assessments. BPA levels in homes and exposure was higher than previously assumed. Previous measurements were actually flawed. Exposure levels were underestimated, are you ready for this? By 44 times. I'll say that again. They were so far off, they were off by 44 times. BPA interferes with many of the body's hormones. And let's jump into phthalates a little bit. Fast food actually may expose consumers to harmful chemicals called phthalates. They damage the chemistry of fatty acids, especially DHA. DHA is your fish oil that is so positive for overall health and really good for cell membrane health and axonal brain health. In addition, phthalates create a zinc deficiency, which also compromises the metabolism of vitamin A and B6. Phthalates can damage the pancreas, and they finally also damage hormonal function, especially thyroid and testosterone. So when you really look at what BPA and phthalates, which are in plastic, do, they're extraordinarily ruinous to overall health. So once again, if anybody has any questions on this, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about plastics, love to talk to you about detox. Sorry I was a little late again. Things got a little busy today. Hope to see you again tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Dr. Rob, always yours in health.